Good evening and welcome to the University of South Florida Contemporary Art Museum on the Tampa campus. Tonight we are fortunate to have Bosco Sodi, the artist who has a solo exhibition, Básico, now installed in the Contemporary Art Museum, and the curator of the exhibition, Christian Viveros-Fauné. And tonight they're going to do to lead us on a tour of the exhibition. We've had to change plans because of the upsurge in COVID. Otherwise, this would have been a live talk on campus. But we're going to do our best to adjust, and we invite you all to come and see the exhibition, which officially opens with a soft opening tomorrow night on the 14th of January and continues through March 4th. There are a couple of other events that you might like to know about. Several years ago, in 2019, I guess that is several years ago, Bosco Sodi participated in another exhibition Christian organized called The Visible Turn and produced a wall out of more than 2,000 bricks on the apron of the museum. He has now designed a new performance installation, Tabula Rasa. And if you would like to participate in a workshop to make seed spheres or seed pod spheres, that will be on February 2nd, led by Sarah Howard, one of our other curators at the Contemporary Art Museum, and will be performed at Meacham Farms on February 12th. There are all kinds of other events associated with this exhibition. Most importantly, I invite you to come and see it and go to our website to be reminded of other opportunities to engage with the exhibition. For this exhibition, we produced a new format workbook, and this is it. And we invite you to come in to see the exhibition. And if you're a student and produce an ID card, we'll give you one. Otherwise, we're offering them for a small price for sale. So it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Bosco Sodi and Christian Viveros-Fauné, who will walk you through the exhibition, and following their remarks and their conversation, you may ask a question, post it on, what is it, Don, on the? In the chat. In the chat, yeah. Post it in the chat, and we'll introduce your question to the artist and the curator. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Hello. I must go on. I can't go on. I'll go on. Those last words from Beckett's Unnameable sort of come to mind as we again roll with the punches of COVID-19 and the new sort of Omicron variant. We would have much rather have introduced this to you actually sort of in person, but here we are virtually. Once again, through the miracle, I suppose, of Zoom, but very happy to have you with us. And I'm very happy to have my buddy Bosco Sodi here to talk about his work with me. Let me just say a few words about Bosco that I prepared. They're very short. Let me just say that there are artists who leave their marks in the studio and others that take the studio out into the world. A reduced group does both. Again, I'm happy to say that one of these polymaths, because that's essentially what folks like this are, is my friend, the Brooklyn-based Mexican-born artist, Bosco Sodi. Bosco is a full-time painter, a carver of stone and clay. He's also a committed educator, a performance artist, an exhibition maker, a collector of first-rate architecture, the director of a widely esteemed artist residency, and a world-renowned social sculpture. We'll get to we get to all of those things, but particularly the last bit later on in our conversation, social sculpture. But now let me actually sort of introduce him properly. Bosco, it's a total pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for having this show here in Tampa and bringing this work to us. You've been here all week, basically, yes, with me, and we've been sort of readjusting not only the format of this conversation, but also readjusting work that is very dependent in a certain way or speaks to environments, specific
Yes.
environments and specific materials, to this environment.
Yes.
So happy to have you here, man.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you very much to all the team of the USF Camp for making this exhibition possible, but also to make it so easy to do it. Thank you, Christian, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. And
always, and we've worked together on a couple of occasions before.
Since we met in that Race Meat studio, no?
And we met it, that's right.
Long time ago.
I mentioned Bosco is Brooklyn-based. He's got an amazing studio in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn. And we did meet, because I also live in Brooklyn, New York, probably a decade and change ago. And you know, these are the way these things, this is the way these things happen. Folks meet, they converse, there's some scene sort of made, and then maybe a decade later, here we are with what I think is our second or third project.
Yes, together, yes.
But in any event, let's talk specifically about this show. This show has a number of components. Actually, it has 4 components.
Yes.
We're going to walk you through those components with the help of our crack team and our sort of handmade dolly. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is a set of paintings that Bosco did in 2019, was it?
2019, I think.
2019.
2019.
Correct. One of which you see behind us. It's a set of monochrome paintings, 7.
7 of them, yes.
7 of them, right? We'll get into sort of the meat of what they're about. But before we walk into our gallery, our West Gallery, where those paintings are arrayed, I actually want to take a look at right behind Bosco's right shoulder here. Well, Bosco, why don't you tell us what that is?
Well, that's a branch. We have a house upstate New York, and I find these kind of branches on the winter that they are so beautiful. So I begin to cut them and kind of collecting them. And these branches at the studio after doing one of the paintings. So I also like a lot that concept of an object that looks like I don't know, like a thunder that is going up, or this kind of fractional composition.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that also serves as like your painting implement for this series, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's your brush. Right?
That became well, all these series, when my gallery from New York, Asmin, proposed me to do a show, I wanted to do a show, and as you know, my career was based in form in Spain, and I have admired all the Spanish painters, of course, from Picasso to Tapies to Miró, all the Catalan informalists, but also the Altamira caves.
Right.
And I wanted to do a kind of homage to Spain, to say thank you to Spain, because it was the place that I began my career, the country that embraced me in a way. And when I was living in Barcelona, I used to go quite often to the Miró Foundation. And Miró in the foundation has this room that is just 3 white paintings with just 1 black gesture.
Yeah, exactly.
And Miró was saying that these paintings were the top of simplicity for him. And he did it, of course, at a bigger age. He was very old at the time. And it was when he didn't care about anything at all. And he did these paintings that for me are the best painting of him. So I wanted to do something not similar, but something that evokes these paintings that were so important for me. And at one time I was in my house upstate. There is a lake close by, and the lake was full of snow. Well, it was frozen and full of snow. So I came with these branches. I began to print the branches on the snow, and the result for me was very interesting, very beautiful, because they, as you know, my paintings talk about the uncertainty, the accident, the non-control. But also I feel that with these kind of imprints, they also look like fossils, like huellas, ¿cómo se dice huellas?
Traces.
Like traces.
Footprints
so,
almost.
like footprints on it. And so I begin to experiment on those ones, and well, it's a series that I wanted to to make an homage to Spain.
Right. Let's move into the gallery and look at more of them, because the one behind us, the one that was immediately behind us, is black. The rest here,
the rest are white, as the white paintings of Miró.
Right.
And they are not the same size as the paintings of Miró, but they are the same proportion. I also did 6 of the same size of the Miró Foundation that were shown at my gallery. And that's the concept. I mean, the concept of these paintings is about talking about the passing of time, but also the simplicity of a gesture, but also the uniqueness of a branch, no? The uniqueness of this kind of works, and how when you obtain simplicity is the most complex thing to do, in a way.
But like that, to obtain simplicity is the most complex thing to do.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's something that really runs through. That's almost like a tagline for your work, you know. That's almost like the dictum that informs.
See, I mean, it's. I think a word that is simple, it speaks for itself. I mean, it doesn't need an explanation or.
The simple things are the hardest to do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, because you have to get completely disconnected from your mental state, in a way, when you're doing the paintings or when you're doing the sculpture. If you want them to be real simple, you have to be completely disconnected from the mental part of your body and just work as a craftsman will do, just by instruments.
Right. Well, let's actually talk about some of the material that you're using in these paintings, and if the surfaces look a little different because they have these traces, right, almost these grooves or paths, right? I said somewhere, or I got the idea somewhere, that for me anyway, they resemble so many things, right? But they resemble certain topographies. You could read all kinds of sort of information into that, but you do tend to build up surfaces for wall work like this. The applications here are different, but let's talk about the actual materials that you make these surfaces.
Since I was very young, my parents used to take us a lot to see the Maya ruins and the Aztec ruins, and I always was very attracted to the stelas. I don't know if the people know what stelas, but stelas are these sculptures on flat rocks.
Yes.
That they have a kind of this objective presence.
Right.
And a very special energy. So since I went to Barcelona, I began to experiment on how to give texture and objectivity and to these paintings. And of course, at the beginning, I was experimenting with marble dust and the same things that the Tapies or the Catalan informalists they were doing.
Right.
But then one day I went to the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum in Madrid, and I bought a catalog for my mother, and it was a show of Braque. And as you know, Braque, the paintings are very flat normally.
They're completely flat.
But in the catalog said that when Braque wanted to give some texture to the painting, he used sawdust. So I had the idea to begin to experiment, to mix the sawdust with the pigments and the acrylic, and begin to do this kind of organic mixture that is more unpredictable than a industrial product that can be the marble dust or any other varnishes or anything like that.
Unpredictable as in it changes.
Yes, of course, the organic materials are more unpredictable, right, because they have different components each time. Right. A sawdust can be of oak, or it can be of rosewood, and that's a completely chemical, different composition.
Right.
So, and one day at the studio, by chance, it was on a Friday, and I had a bucket full of this mixture, or however you want to call it, and I dropped it by mistake, but it was too late because I had to pick up my kids on the school, and I leave it there, and I went out for the weekend. I didn't come back to the studio, and then I come back one Monday, and I see these amazing cracks on the surface, and that's when I say, well, I'm going to appropriate that accident and try to embrace it in a bigger way. I mean, I'm convinced that when you are an artist, the more open that you are to accidents and to non-control and to chance, the more roads open to you for the work.
Right, you're almost working with living material, basically.
Yes,
And I didn't know that about that eureka moment. I didn't know that that's how you found the
See,
material.
that was the found, and then I had to experiment with it. At the beginning, it was coming out from the paintings, and it was because also I like I'm very interested in the part of the process of the work.
Right, right.
For me, it's much more important the process than the outcome. For me, when I was doing this, the fun was to hit them with the branches, to print the branches, without knowing what was going to be the outcome. Sometimes I'm very lucky and they come very well. Sometimes not so well.
Right, right. Well, I mean, one of the things that's sort of interesting to me too is that not only are you taking into account the living elements or reality of this sludge that you're using, right? The sludge that you make, and then it hardens and you shape it, but also that you're taking into account the atmospherics of the environment that you're in.
See, they change completely.
Right, and tell us how they change.
They change
because
completely
that's
depending
also
on the weather, on the humidity.
Right.
The sawdust is a very important component because sometimes it's darker or lighter, so it changes the final outcome of the pigment.
Meaning, if you're doing this work, for example, in your studio in Red Hook, do you get different results from your studio in Oaxaca?
Yes, completely.
There you go.
Completely, right. And for me, it's very difficult to remember the date of the paintings because I'm very dyslexic, but I can always remember where I did them because I see the cracks and everything. I know when I used to have the studio in Berlin, the paintings of Berlin are very special because we were having heating all the time, of course, during winter. Right. So the paintings did crack in a very strong way, in a very chaotic way, very fast.
Right.
Because the temperature and the dryness was very high. But when you do it in New York, near the sea, that is much more humid, the cracking is more settled. But also if you do it in winter, that is also a little bit of heating, not so much as in Berlin. So it changed completely. And I love that part of my work, that it's site-specific and irrepeatable. Even for me, I mean, there are a lot of anecdotes about it. One time we were doing this red Tondo painting in New York. I was already in New York, and when we finished it, I was not so convinced about it, but there were two guys helping me, and they told me, well, let's wait, and we destroy it next week. They were tired. And then we come next week, and the cracking was so perfect and so beautiful, but there is a big part of the work that is not made by me, and that's what I like.
Right, right. So it's almost co-authored by...
Yes, but then I take less responsibility if it's bad. No?
Yeah, well, no, I think the responsibility is still all yours, or the galleries. Sorry, Casman. What was I going to say? I think I was going to mention the original sort of source, right, for these things. I lived in Barcelona for a while. What years did you live there, actually?
I lived there from 2000 to 2010, I think.
Okay, yeah.
10 years.
Yeah, and I lived there less than that. I lived there from 89 to 92, but in any event, among other things, we pull for the same football team, the same soccer
Barça
team, which is terrible right this minute. But no, I was going to mention the title of Moreau's triptych, and I'm going to really massacre the French. Peinture sur fond blanc pour la cellule d'un solitaire. And that's painting on a white background for the cellar recluse. There's a fellow writer named P.F. Chan who talked about that triptych as a solitary trembling line, a simple gesture that spoke volumes about minimalism and freedom. Do you connect with that definition?
Sí, totally, totally. And that's why when I was experimenting for this series that I wanted to dedicate to Spain, first of all, I tried to do another test of different things, and then I found that these kind of things were very settled, also very, as you say, minimal in a way, but also very, very free. I think Miró did it for this Catalan that was in jail. When he was in jail, what was the name of the very important Catalan figure that was in jail?
There were so many.
No, but it's very important. I don't remember the name, but he did it as a homage to him that he was in jail at that time.
Okay.
And that's why they talk about the prison.
Right. Under Franco.
Yes.
Right. Well, in terms of minimalism, you've often described your sort of aesthetic as pre-industrial minimalism. I think I've read that a couple of times, right?
Yes.
I've sort of taken the liberty to make up my own verbiage and have referred to it as pre-Columbian inspired minimalism. Again, does any of that sort of like connect with you?
Bueno, I mean, certainly it's a minimal concept in a way, but also, I mean, it's work by hand, it's imperfect. It's not industrial production. None of them, even here or the spheres or the sacks, it's also made by hand, but also in a very minimalistic way, using contrary of minimal works that they use much more perfect materials, fabric-made materials. Here it's everything found or made by hand or with a very specific shade of colors.
Right. It's not Corten steel. If
No.
we're talking about sort of like
No.
the original or more conventional notions of minimalism.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, I'm a big admirer of minimalism.
Of course you are. I mean, that, goes without saying. Let's actually go to the West Gallery and see another two bodies of work that we have there. And while we're at it, let me sort of like shift from talking about minimalism and these sort of larger ideas of where we might locate your work to an idea that it's sort of, well, it's also a global idea, an historical idea, but one that you've selected and picked up as something of a flag, that you're something of a standard bearer for, the idea of Wabi-sabi. Can you describe for us what Wabi-sabi
Yes.
means to you?
See, I mean, Wabi-sabi means, I mean, just to define Wabi-sabi is not Wabi-sabi, but Wabi-sabi means how the accident, the non-control, the unpredictability, the organic materials.
It's a Japanese concept.
Yes, the passing of time. It comes from the Buddhist, from the same Buddhism.
Right.
It makes things unique and irrepeatable. So how we have to learn how to deal with the accident, the non-control, the unpredictable, and it's what makes life unique too. And that's a philosophy that I have tried to do in my work, but also in my life. No, to try to. I mean, there is just going to be one life, and people doesn't realize that. And when you see people all the time watching their cell phones and just letting time pass, and life goes super fast. No, like Mastroianni said at the beginning, you see this town that is so far away, and you think that you can go running, and well then. Now at our age, you see the town just in front of here. You
right
say,
in
no,
front of you, frankly.
I don't want to.
Yeah,
I think Wabi-sabi is something that teaches you that, no, that the passing of time, the non-control is something that makes life and art unique. And I think it helps to connect with nature, to connect with other human beings. That is something that we're missing now. And I think art hasn't focused so much yet on that part.
Right.
And I think art it has a responsibility in a way to help on these times with the global warming, with the lack of warmth between humans, and it's one of the most important objectives of art. And I'm not seeing so much of that kind of art. There is a very political art, of course,
yes,
but nothing that really help us to reconnect with ourselves, with the other humans, with nature. I believe that art, and that was one of the reasons that I created Casa Wabi, is that when you teach how to see art to the kids of the communities, you give them some tools to understand better the universe, and when they understand better the universe, it's easy for them to change to change their relationships, to change the way they approach to their own life.
I think actually a discussion of Wabi-sabi is a perfect way to talk about the work that's in this gallery, right?
See, it also came from an accident when the pandemic began in New York in the end of February. We were, me and my family, we were so lucky to be able to go to Casa Wabi, my foundation in Oaxaca. The artists that were at Casa Wabi, there were just 2 artists left, or 3, but they wanted to leave as fast as possible. One from Chile, actually, I don't remember her name, but. So we went to Casa Wabi, and when I talked to my kids, I say, well, if we're going to spend, I don't know how many months there, we have to do projects and we have to do things. We are not going to be, ¿cómo se dice lamentar?
we're not going to feel sorry for ourselves.
We are not going to feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to find ways to take advantage of this time and to always remember this time. So, well, as you know, I work mostly with clay in my studio in Oaxaca. So before going there, I asked the guys that they help me there, okay, bring as more clay as possible because we don't know when they're going to close the towns. I bring also all my writings from 20 years in order to order them, and then we publish a book that we can talk about later.
Yeah, that's right here.
But then when we arrived to Casa Wabi, I begin to do the spheres with my team there. As you know, the spheres are solid, so it takes 2 or 3 people to make them, to move them.
Let's as you talk about them, let's just sort of like maybe concentrate on them. I'm sorry.
See, I mean, they're solid. We made them by hand.
Yep.
And we begin to do the spheres. The spheres take 6 or 8 or to 12 months to dry.
To dry. I mean, let's actually go into the process. Because if I understand correctly, you literally sort of go in and get a huge chunk.
So we begin to drop chunks of clay in order to take out the air.
Okay.
And then we begin to, when we have like a kind of a mountain, we begin to round it slowly, first by hand, taking out, but then by a spatula with water. And then we leave the bottom not so round in order for them to sustain, otherwise they will collapse. And then when we finish making them, we cover them with a plastic, and we have to leave them covered with the plastic for 1 or 2 months. Then we begin to open the plastic once in a while. Then we leave it without the plastic for 3 or 4 months. Then we take them to dry into the sun for all the 3 or 4 months. And then all of them we burn them in a rustic kiln. Why in a rustic kiln? Again, to try to find this uniqueness, this non-control, these accidents.
When you say a rustic kiln, what are we talking about? Like how rustic is it?
Yeah, it's completely rustic. We arm and disarm it every time we cook.
Okay.
We use wood or jacaranda seeds or coconut skin, I don't know how you call it, to burn. So that's why you have different shades of color, different, and it's always unpredictable. And I begin to do that. One of the most important things that Casa Wabi has given me is this relationship with clay, because when there was the first round of artists in residency, Corbin Walker, that is a mutual friend too, he began to work with clay, and I didn't know that there were. I know that there were craftsmen doing bricks around it, but when I arrived to Casa Wabi, Corbin told me, yeah, you have to take your kids to do some clay with the craftsman. So I came with my kids, and they began to do figures, and I did this small cube, like 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. And the craftsman, Abel is his name, he told me, no, it's impossible. It's going to be impossible to dry. And I begin I told him, oh, we have to find a way. Right. And we begin to experiment with these big volumes of clay. But something that has always interested me.
Almost working against the material as basically.
Always challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Challenging
and
the material.
Failing and learning, and then failing again.
Fail better. Right?
Until we got the recipe. But something that is very interesting about clay is, first of all, is that it's something that is in our soul, the clay. Yeah. Clay has been part of the evolution of humans since the very beginning. So that's why when you see a kid...
It's in the Bible.
It's in the Bible, but also it's in our soul. It's like when you're watching a fire, you immediately get pulled by the fire. And you are like hypnotized.
It's Básico.
Yes, because it's Básico because it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
We know that since millions of years, humans go together close to the fire. They feel protected. They feel warm. It was a place of community. So that we have it. It's the same thing with clay. That's why the kids, you give them clay, immediately they begin to do figures because it's in our blood. So that's something that interests me a lot about clay, because I have been lucky to travel around the world, and every time you go to a museum in Korea, in Egypt, in Greece, in Rome, in Mexico, of course, you see the same figures of clay at the very beginning. So I think clay is part of the essence of humans.
Yes.
And also has something beautiful that it involves the 4 elements, no? So it's kind of this
fire, water,
wind,
earth.
No, earth.
Right.
So that's what hooked me. You say?
Yeah, it hooked you.
It hooked me to begin to work with clay, and I fell in love with with the results. And also, every time we fire, I was in Casa Wabi 3 weeks ago. You remember when you were a kid and you were waiting to see the present for Santa Claus, that you were like with trying to stay awake to
catch Santa.
to catch or to go in the morning, early morning. The first thing you were doing when you wake up was running to the same thing I do every time we cook. Every time we cook, I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I go to the kiln, it's still very hot, so I begin to take out the bricks to see what was the outcome of that cooking, because you don't never know if they broke or how they came. So for me, it's like my first desire in the morning, early morning. I go and take a look to open the kiln. It's very, very hot, but I open it very fast and just at least to take a look to what happened.
Well, it's a remarkable environment that you're working in, right?
No, it's beautiful.
I know that, and for those who don't, dial up the Casa Wabi website and you'll see it. We'll talk about Casa Wabi more in a minute, but let's just move, because we've got a few things to talk about. Did you want to say something else about these?
So the action on the spheres is very short.
Yeah.
It's 4 days, but then you just have to take care of them.
Right.
But you don't have any other action on them. So when we finish doing the spheres that we could do the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, then I begin to have the desire of painting. But at that point, everything was closed in Mexico. There was not canvas, there were not stretchers, there were not carpenters to make the stretchers. All the towns around Casa Wabi closed their entrances because they didn't want it to be infected. There was a overreaction maybe, or fair reaction. And I wanted to paint. I needed to paint. For me, it's a necessity to paint. I mean, when I was young, my mother took me to art classes because I had deficit of attention, dyslexia.
I love dyslexic artists because, frankly, they pour what most people sort of do by rote learning and reading to other places. And they make very good artists.
Well, I had hyperactivity too, so I was in these art classes, and art became a necessity for me. I have always do art, even though before I became a professional artist, I was always doing art. So I had a necessity of doing something. And then one day, the guy who makes that goes to the market for us came from the market with all the vegetables in 2 of these sacks.
In these sacks,
right? They are chili sacks.
Yep.
For dry chili. They smell like chili.
They still smell like chili, right?
Yes.
No, I smelled it before. Yep.
And I fell in love with the sacks. I mean, of course, I'm a big fan of arte povera, of the gutai. Yes. So I saw these sacks, natural sacks, that they already have the accidents, stains, the letters, the broken parts. And I thought, well, why I'm going to take a look to the storage of Casa Wabi to see what can I find in the storage. And I found one oil painting, one red oil painting, one yellow painting, one orange oil painting. And I had to, ¿cómo se dice? Not to spend all of them very fast, because
you had to ration.
I had to ration.
You had to ration all that color.
And
right.
then I began to do every day a song, my interpretation of a song. So I was doing every day either yellow, orange, or mixing them. And very fast I use all the oil painting that I have. But I was lucky enough to find a place in Mexico City that was open. And one of my friends that was coming to stay with us, he bring a lot of oil paintings, and I was able to do one every day for the whole pandemic. Not just songs, I also did some abstract ones. And it was something, so for me, they have a very big sentimental value, these works.
Right.
Because it was, I mean, it reminds me about that time. Also, we had it was very tough, but also we had amazing time with the family, amazing time with the friends. We were so lucky to be at Casa Wabi. So for me, they have a big sentimental value.
Right, no, and I understand both. I mean, as mementos of that period, and I think we all have mementos of the way we've sort of spent the pandemic, but they also sort of wind up symbolizing the simplicity of it and the literally sort of the dawning.
See, the rhythm of the
dawn
sun.
And dusk, right? Dawn and dusk. It's the sun sort of like going, coming up and then setting. And the other thing I sort of want to point out quickly is the railroad spikes that were used to hang these, right?
See,
Again,
I had these railroads. When Tadao poured the concrete, he always leaves
That's Tadao Ando, the
Tadao Ando, the architect. He leaves the holes in the concrete.
right.
And a long time ago, I bought these rail nails,
Yeah.
and I leave them in all the holes in my studio. So when I wanted to hang them, it was exactly the measurement of the holes made by Ando. So I began to use them, and then but I like a lot the concept of materiality and.
I think your work in general is full of these sort of like organic connections,
See, organic-
these things that feel like serendipity or kismet, but in fact, I think it's simply built into your process.
But
and
then you
built
get
into your
confused. You don't know
thinking.
if it was meant to be or you found it or.
But that's,
No, even for me, it's
that's what it
confused. No, I
means,
say,
right,
well,
right.
these kind of small accidents, but maybe it also I think artists, we have this kind of sixth sense to appropriate these accidents and
With objects and
Yeah.
visual. Let's sit down for a minute. So you were very busy during quarantine.
well, no, see, I mean, no, actually, you know that at what speed do I go? So.
Yeah, you.
So it took me a few hours to do the ones that my ration of painting.
Yes.
Then it took me a few hours just to see the spheres, and then I have the whole rest of the day free. So with my family and all our guests at Casa Wabi, we did a community store outside of Casa Wabi that we built it ourselves with the help of some workers that were there. And then also I work on all the gardens of Casa Wabi. So I try to maintain myself, otherwise I will become crazy. I mean, those times. But then, as I told you,
I've had you over for dinner.
Yeah.
I know how crazy you can get and impatient. But you know, you also did one other thing, and you made allusion to it probably about 10, 15 minutes ago, and that is that you took your notes. You made sure to take your notes from Brooklyn to Mexico.
see, when we were leaving, these notes are a kind of project that you always have in a
Sort of a dream project or
same
something.
project. You have it in your, ¿cómo se dice, un cajón?
Yeah, your drawer. It's a drawer project.
Yeah, so when I was talking with my kids about doing something important there, I took all these notes, say, well, this is the time to order them, and of course, and as I'm dyslexic, all of them they're completely with bad orthography. They are bad.
Bad spelling.
I don't know the redaction. I don't know.
Yeah, the editing, the syntax,
It's
whatever.
terrible. So I began to work. My mother, she's very good writing, and she has wrote some books. She helped me, and I sent her the notes, and say, well, please give them some form, and then I work a lot on that because for me that's very difficult.
Well, you did, and here it is. This is the English version of an original Spanish publication that Hilario Galguera put together with
my gallery from Mexico.
From your-
at
correct.
that time, Mauricio was working there. I sent him the writings, and he told me, well, we should publish this. I was very skeptical
skeptical.
to publish it, but then we agree on doing a very simple publication that was not was like a small haikus, like a small,
They feel like haikus. I mean, you're not going to be able to pick this up, but here you go, something like this.
but something that you can read easily, and you can
Yeah.
open any page. And I'm not trying to create a dogma. It was not like a treaty of art. It was just my way of seeing life, my art in general, and something very simple and with a lot of humildad, no me acuerdo cómo se dice.
Yeah, humility.
Humility.
You know, and yes, and it totally reads that way. And I would suggest for anyone following this, you know, contact Casman Gallery in New York and get yourself a copy of these. I think the English ones, the Spanish version sold out, and the English one is available. But just as Bosco said, they essentially sort of read like haikus. Clearly, because I over-prepare, these are you know, way too many to read. But I did want to read at least one of them to you because they are sort of perfect distillations of Bosco's process. And so here goes one, and this is actually in one of the first pages. My process seems simple, but it is truly a complex endeavor. Many factors interfere with it, since it is in the nature of organic elements to behave capriciously. Nature itself changes, and many elements of my work are dependent on nature's will. Nature's mysteries transform these creations into something very gratifying, without knowing perfectly what the final results will be. And it's printed in the page essentially like a poem, right?
Yes.
It's almost like an E. Cummings poem. And it's titled, again, En Cuarentena, in Quarantine, right?
See, we decided to put that title because this was when I ordered them. But these notes, I have taken them since 20 years. When I was traveling, some of them they were in napkins or in hotel papers. Any kind of idea when I'm traveling or when I'm reading something and I have a note, I begin to collect them, and that was the time to do it.
I think this is a good time actually to move into talking about what I've sort of described as it's a big German word, Gesamtkunstwerk, your big sort of total work of art. I mentioned you as sort of a social sculptor. That's a sculptor. That's art speak basically for an idea that Joseph Beuys had about art being able to sort of shape social behavior. Among other things, Joseph Beuys, the great German artist from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was the founder of the Green Party. So he's a guy who actually sort of like applied himself to, at least according to his light, improving society. Casa Wabi is such a huge endeavor, and I know we've just talked through it sort of lightly, but can you give us an idea of like how many facets it has? Because it has a number of facets. It's an artist residency. It's your studio to start with, right? It's an artist residency. It is an exhibition space, or rather several exhibition spaces, one in Oaxaca, one in Mexico, another in Japan, right? And lastly, but not least important in any way, it's also a vehicle for community development at some certain.
Community development and exchange of idea between art and artists in the local communities.
Yes.
I think it's very important to understand that the richness also of the local community is enormous.
Yeah.
So for the artists to be able to do an exchange of ideas and exchange of work together, it's very fruitful. The idea of making Casa Wabi, it's when I begin to become successful. I don't know how you can call it. I think there is a lack of social commitment in the art world. Terrible.
We talk a good game, but
yes, but the facts are very few.
yes.
So I thought, I have the responsibility of giving back. First of all, I want to give back to my country, that is Mexico. But second, to my fellow colleagues, the artists. And we decided to create this foundation that we invite 6 artists at a time to be in a residence for between 1 month and 3 months. And for them, I don't care if they work or not in their studio. It's not my problem. They can read the books that they have never read or write or whatever, but the things that they have to do a very strong project with the local communities. So we have to make a different approach. I don't ask them for work on compensation or anything like that. I don't want to collect work. We ask them to do a very strong project with the local communities. We also have a mobile library that goes to the 14 communities that we work to read to the kids, to give books to the kids. We have a mobile cinema that also goes, and these communities, they have never been in the cinema. So we pass them movies with content like Charlie Chaplin, Studio Ghibli, Cantinflas, something fun, but also that has a little bit of meaning.
Right.
We have an exhibition space that we do a show of established artists every day.
Yeah, Lawrence Weiner, you've done there, Ugo Rondinone. You got a project coming up with
Daniel Buren.
You got a project coming up with Huma Baba.
We're doing a project with Huma Baba. We're opening a show the 12th of February with Huma Baba, that she was so gracious to she's going there and produce some work over there. We feel honored. And then we have also a clay pavilion made by Álvaro Siza, the very well-known architect, that we bring 3 school classes a week, for the kids to do clay. We put them classical music, then we show them the exhibition, we show them the architectural pavilions, then we pass them a movie. It's like a cultural day for them, and it has really, really been a huge success with the communities.
Sorry, go on.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about the architecture for 2 seconds, because, you know, I think the fundamental part of what you do is what you just described. But aside from that, you know, you have managed to convince some major architects to come and work in Puerto Escondido, Oaxaca. And there's sort of an origin story that I know that I'd like for you to tell the audience, of how you got the thing built and with whom.
See, no, when I went to do an art residency in Japan in 2003 or 4, I don't remember. And I love architecture, and I like Ando. I liked Ando before, but I was able to see some of the buildings, and one of my objectives became to do my studio with Ando.
With Tadao Ando.
With Tadao Ando.
Legendary architect.
And then I began to send him faxes. At that time there was not email, or at least I was not using email, and he was not using email. And every year, very politely, he was rejecting the idea. And then by chance, by a friend, Yoshi, he introduced me to Ando, and I proposed him to, at that time I had already the idea of the foundation. I proposed him the idea of the foundation. We went in Red Hook, he came to the studio, he fell in love with the red paintings, my big red paintings. We went to have lunch in a coffee place nearby, and he did some drawings, but he says, well, I'm gonna think about it. And then when Sandy happened,
Hurricane Sandy. Right, which hit New York and devastated, well, a good part of New York, but specifically Red Hook, where your studio is.
My studio totally disappeared. We lost 18 paintings or 17 paintings, the whole studio, all the pigments. But then there was I had like 1 ton of pigment there, red pigment, that I bought from India. But the pigment was very light, not easy to dissolve in water. So after the hurricane, there was a picture in the newspaper showing my studio in Red Hook, and all the sea in front red, and the studio red, and the sidewalk red. And I think Yoshi sent I don't remember who sent, but I think it was Yoshi. He sent the picture to Ando, also with the studio totally destroyed. And that's when Ando said, okay, let's go ahead and do the foundation. And I mean, for me, it was, I'm a big admirer of Ando. I love his architecture. I love him as a human being. We have become kind of friends. Every time I go to Japan, I try to visit him. And well, that was the very beginning of it.
And since then, you've worked with other architects, including Álvaro Siza, who you just mentioned, for this clay pavilion. And sort of almost in finishing, I want to talk about the clay pavilion for 2 seconds, because we won't be able to show you the work today, but for those who come tomorrow and through the exhibition, which finishes, I believe, second week of March, if I'm correct. You'll be able to see about, is it 20, 22? I forget.
16.
16. There you go. 16. Thank you. Clay figures made by a number of young artists, right?
Sí.
Very young artists, children that Bosco, or rather Casa Wabi, has worked with in these workshops.
We made a selection. I mean, one of my routines.
Yeah.
Every morning is to go to the pavilions when I'm at Casa Wabi, and I'm super surprised when I see the figures that the kids do. I feel very jealous, because as I was mentioned, I still work with, I try to work with less duality as possible, but as an adult, it's very difficult to get rid of that duality.
They're completely intuitive.
They're totally intuitive, and they're beautiful. So when we came with the idea of the show, that we talk about bringing, so I choose the ones that for me are the best ones, but for me in a very abstract way, and we're going to show them here, because at the end it's part of the essence of Casa Wabi.
Now, before we, and we're basically coming up on time now, and before we come up on time, we're going to do some questions. We're going to take some questions. But right before that, I want to say, well, a couple things. That one, I'm going to be doing a curator's tour of the exhibition virtually, unfortunately, on February 3rd. There's not much we can do about current public health conditions, except hope that they'll improve. But there will be an outdoor performance of a work by Bosco called Tabula Rasa at Meacham Urban Farms in downtown Tampa on February 12th. That'll be led by my colleague Sarah Howard here at the museum. Let's talk about Tabula Rasa before we hit those questions. Obviously, Tabula Rasa means clean slate in Latin, right? You performed the first iteration of Tabula Rasa at Washington Square Park, yes. Right? And that was your second performance at Washington yes. Square Park, right? And in fact, on the 12th, it'll be your second performance in Tampa as yes. well, which we're actually sort of proud to have hosted. But tell me about Tabula Rasa. What does it consist of?
Well, Tabula Rasa, the idea of Tabula Rasa came after when things begin to look brighter. Now we are in slope again, but just, how to say in the movie, just when I was trying to get up, they pushed me back in.
Exactly.
Right? But we were thinking, I was thinking that things begin to get brighter. And I wanted to do, I did this clay spheres, but with corn seeds in the inside.
Kind of like this.
Kind of like this, but without cooking.
Yes.
And we installed in Washington Square Park the number of days that has passed since the official beginning of COVID. That was 435 at the time, I think. And these spheres were very beautiful, handmade. Each one, I made them by myself with the help of my family. And we did an installation that was also aesthetically very beautiful and very essential in a way. And then we invited the public to take out the seeds, bring them home, put them in a pot, put earth and put water, and then corn will grow. Like trying to give this kind of message of hope that at the end life prevails, that whatever happens, things get better. And even if we're in a terrible time, things can improve. But also, we are in a respectful way, reminding all the casualties and all the suffering of all the people that has
and
not
also
been so lucky as us.
And also our intimate connection to nature, right?
Yes, of course.
Which we, should definitely be underscoring, in the middle of this process that we're all sort of living through.
If we don't do it now,
when will we ever do it? Absolutely. Well, listen, I think it's probably a good time to go to questions. Anna, what do we got?
So we have two questions. Our first one is, how old are your children, and are any following in your footsteps?
Any what?
And are any following in your footsteps?
Well, there are 18, 17, and 13. But thanks God they are not in my footsteps. I mean, being an artist is very tough, and a lot of people that is hearing us here, young artists, the beginning is very, very tough. And I don't want them to have the pressure of following the steps of your father. No, I mean, I want them to do whatever they want and to be happy. No, I don't want to be responsible of any happiness or unhappiness on their side. So they have to choose their way, and maybe Mariana, my daughter that is 17, she is the most artistic one. She will be maybe, I don't know, maybe a writer or something like that. But
God forbid.
Yeah?
God forbid.
Well, I mean, whatever they choose, I'm happy to.
What's the second question there?
Thank you. Our second question is, most of the work in this exhibition is in multiples. What is the relationship between the multiple and the unique or the original in your work?
Well, it's not so much about multiples. I love how can you say it in English? Like the correlationships of the works, the dialogue, the intervention of the space between two different objects or two different paintings. I love that concept of materiality, of how the works sculpt. how the works is called, the cubic meters, not just the flat walls, but also the dialogue, the tensions that it forms between two paintings or two objects. I love that thing. It's what makes it very theatrical and also like life. No, we're always exchanging energy between objects and people, and I try in all my shows to do that, to try to get that feeling.
Context changes everything, often radically. And by the way, you know, these works may look similar, but because Bosco has sort of subjected them to these aleatory processes, right? They have cracks in different shapes, and they've basically sort of taken on different characteristics. The paintings that we were looking at earlier, we were sort of laughing before we actually went on camera with you. The branch being pulled through the pigments often leaves pieces of the original branch. In the same way, for those who know your Pollock, that, you know, there are cigarette butts embedded in paintings at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. These are accidents. However purposeful they may seem, they are accidents. It's nature, it's fortune, destiny, if you believe in it, basically sort of interceding in the final product. So they're all actually unique. They're all unique pieces.
And irrepeatable.
And unrepeatable, precisely.
Even if I want to do them again, it will be a completely different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't have power over that.
No, not over that. Anna, do we have any other questions? Great. Listen, I think we're out of time. So I want to thank you, Bosco, very much, man, for being here. And
thanks to you, Christian, again. Thanks to all the team of the USF CAM. It has been a pleasure, and I hope we do it again sometime.
Yeah, well, so do we. And again, I'll say the same. Thanks to the entire team. We put a lot of work into this. Thank you, Margaret Miller, always a great support. We couldn't do any of this without you. But it is truly a great team that brings you these exhibitions. I'm so proud to be here and to be able to work with artists like Bosco. Now, some last bit of cleanup. Everyone, I want to encourage everyone to visit the exhibition physically or virtually, however you like, right? And also remind folks to purchase this terrific workbook. This is our pilot workbook, where this is the format that we're going to begin to produce our workbooks in. I'd rather call them workbooks than catalogs, right? You see they've got these hole punches. At some point, when you get enough of these, you can actually sort of put them in a nice binder. They're only $15, marked down actually from 1995. I'm just joking. They're $15, free to USF students with an ID. That means you students in my Poor People's Art class, come and get the book. I'll be asking you for it. And what else? Nothing. It's been a total pleasure. Bosco, again.
Like the Big Lebowski said, let's go bowling.
Let's go bowling. Let's go bowling, everybody. Thank you so much.